Hi, everybody. So I got a much better crowd when I was just a professor. So you become a vice dean, nobody wants to hear anything you have to say. If it wouldn't be too mortifying, would you mind coming up forward? So I'm actually not doing that. No quizzes, nothing like that. This is really pretty relaxed. So this is, actually, I think you might want to turn off this one because I've got the walk around. So this is the third in a series of a lot of stuff lectures. There was how to read a lot of stuff, how to write a lot of stuff. And our friends at the library, Sheila Thalheimer and Steve Sayers, said, could you do something on how to organize a lot of stuff? So, okay. Okay, so that's, like I said, that's your decision to make. Here's what I'm going to talk about. First, how to organize files, how to organize meetings, and how to organize your schedule. This is completely idiosyncratic, but it seemed to me that this was the kind of thing that you might benefit from. So let me start with the basic idea, which is from one of my favorite essays of all times by the great psychologist William James in his, was really the first kind of textbook on psychology written in the United States. And it's just a magnificent essay on habit. And he talks a lot, and the basic physiology that he's talking about is correct, which is, you become what you do. That was essentially William James's view of the world. And he talks a lot about the importance of habits and how basically it allows you not to have to spend a lot of time thinking about things that you really shouldn't be thinking about. As he says, if every morning you had to decide, am I going to put on my right shoe first or my left shoe first, you would just end up being paralyzed. And I think that basic principle applies to organizing any part of your life that you're trying to organize. Makes as much stuff habitual as possible. So let's start with filing. Now, I learned how to file back in the old days when there were no personal computers. And I have large paper files, which I have not completely purged, despite all the advice I'm about to give you. But I took, a while back, I developed my own filing system, which I keep, and which actually works very well on computers as well. So my first basic piece of advice is don't clutter up your desktop with every single file and folder you're going to have. Instead, do what most archives do, and that's organize things in this way. Basically, 3 tiers of organization. And this is just standard. If you go to the National Archives, so you're doing archival work, you'll see there are record groups. Within record groups, there are series. Within series, there are folders. And then within folders, there are particular items. And this is, one of those self-help books that are out there, actually from back sometime in the 70s. The woman's name is Pat Dorff. She was a librarian who had clearly worked in an archive. And this is basically her system. It's what I use for my paper files, but I apply it completely to my computer files as well. So what does that mean? I'll give you an example. So I actually have, by the way, there'll be a lot of kind of obsessive compulsive weirdness in this talk. I have a complete index of my files. Once you go through the work of doing that, it's not hard to update. So One record group that I have is RES for research. Another record group I have is PB for personal business. I have a record group called SAIS. Within those, I have different series. So, and it's completely idiosyncratic. That really doesn't make a difference because it works for me. It can be whatever works for you. So for example, under research, I keep syllabi. I have a series on syllabi and pedagogy, one on general military history, one, for those of you who know me, of course, there's one on Winston Churchill. And then under that, there's numbered folders. She recommends only using 3-digit numbers starting with 100. For some reason, that works better. So you begin with 100. So let's say, I think this one, 102, is writings about Churchill regarding World War II. And that's what one of the folders that's in my filing cabinet looks like. There's the record group, which I always put in red magic marker. The CH is short for this series, which is Winston Churchill. Pick some abbreviation that makes it easy. This is folder 102. And so anything that I have on paper, which is about Churchill during World War II, is in that folder. I have exactly the same organizational scheme on my computer. So I've got a PB record group for personal business. I've got a RES record group for research, and it matches completely. And over time, actually, I have been purging my paper files, but there's some things that I'm not going to get rid of because I don't have electronic versions of them, and there's not enough hours in Peter Kunz's day to turn them all into PDFs and put them in that. There is a lot to be said for doing this. I have another record group that's called FIN for finance. And within that, the series are usually by year. So I have never had to cast around to figure out, okay, where are my tax returns from 2015? FIN, series is tax, the folders are numbered, and there's all the material, or what charitable deductions did I claim that? All that stuff, it's just really easy to find. And I can't tell you how much easier it makes your life if you know where to find stuff. And as I've said, by the way, in the previous 2 lectures, however bad you think you have it now, it only gets worse. It only gets worse. And staying organized and trying to keep on top of your files will not get easier. It'll just get more and more difficult. The advantage, of course, nowadays with a computer, you can have it automatically backed up to the cloud, which is really where it should be, rather than on a hard drive. And the better cloud services are encrypted, so nothing is secure. The Chinese have all of my personal data. Thank you, OPM. But it's reasonably secure, and this will make your life a lot easier if you're writing papers or anything like that. You can basically make that system work for just about anything. Any questions about just organizing files? Yeah, Peter.
So for this filing system, when you think about a computer, is there an order in which you like to name the file, make it even easier, kind of visibility-wise? So do you put, say, the record group first, series, kind of the dash, or sort of how do you?
So I think it's very important to have nested folders. So when I open up, I use a Mac. So when I go to Documents and I open it up, there's RES-research. That is a folder. I click on that, a whole bunch of folders are going to open up, which are series folders. Click on one of those, you have all the other stuff. And the key is to design, the key to this is really to design your own system. I mean, your classification system might be completely different than mine. But the main thing is once you have it, you stick to it. That's all. And you'll find it a lot easier to put your hands on the things you really need to put your hands on. And if you do, to the extent How many of you actually have substantial paper files? Yeah, I mean, it's generationally different. But to the extent you have it, make sure that it's, whatever your system you're using for paper, use it electronically as well. And anybody else? The librarians want to say anything about this sort of thing, because this really is more your bailiwick. No? Yeah. Well, actually, I'm talking like an archivist. It's really more. It's more like being an archivist than a librarian. And by the way, one of the great principles of archives is once you've got the system set up, no matter how squirrely it is, you don't mess with it.
Other than the file type, that's
Right.
something to keep in your mind. Especially if you're getting into PDFs, it could be an archive PDF if this is something that you really want to handle. But, you know, you may think Word is stable 15 years from now, 25 years from now. Are you going to be able to get into that Word document then?
Right. Yeah. Now, let me. So as you name your computer files, or basically any file, and I do this for any computer file that I generate, I always begin with a YYMMDD time step. When was this thing created? Because particularly in the computer age, you're going to generate multiple iterations of articles, of notes, of letters. So even if I write, so let's say I write a letter of recommendation, which, trust me, I do a lot of. And SAIS students keep on coming back to the well, you know, could you write me a letter of recommendation for these folks? Could you write me a letter of recommendation for those folks? And I'll always have the same form for the title of the letter of recommendation. I'm writing for Peter. It'll be 1902-05 EAC on PK. I know who EAC is. It'll be under a Peter Kunze folder in my letter of recommendations series. And then when, you know, Peter comes to me a year later and asks for another letter of recommendation, you know, and at that point he's done some other miraculous thing and discovered a cause for cancer, I will then have an updated letter of recommendation, and I'll know which is which. So you really critical to do this, particularly in the electronic world. I always fail at this, but it's really a good idea. When you create a document, when you get something that you want to keep, immediately get in the habit of putting it in the right file so you can find it. This is true of paper files, and that one's hard to live with. I finally got a really good shredder, so I began working through my old financial records. By the way, it's a good idea to have a shredder, particularly in Washington. Okay, so that's it on filing. Anybody on filing? Okay. Organizing meetings. Everybody has lots of meetings. You'll have more and more meetings. As a vice dean, my life is nothing but meetings. Nothing. That's all I do all day is meetings. So here's some very basic principles. Be on time. And kind of quietly insist that other people be on time. You don't have to pound your fist, but if the meeting is called for 9, the meeting should begin at 9. You should be in your chair 5 minutes early. If you show up late for the meeting you called, it is a gesture of disrespect to the people who you've called. In general, not being on time is really a bad thing. And people will interpret it as a discourtesy. When I say be on time about ending it. If I say a meeting is going to run no more than an hour, it will run no more than an hour. I have a big weekly staff meeting now, which I've convened. I've realized that one, after a little bit of experimentation, that has to be 90 minutes. So I tell people, starts at 11, you will be out of there by 12:30, I promise. And I stick to that. And that's not just a question of being courteous, but if, you know, the purpose of meetings is, part of them is to build a team. And it's very hard to build a team if it just feels kind of loose and sloppy and unfocused. This sounds silly, but it's not. What do you intend to accomplish with this meeting? Even if it's a weekly staff meeting, what is it that I want to have happen this week? And that can, even if you have recurring tasks. So for example, in what we call the executive council, which is the vice dean and the assistant deans, during admission season, basically I asked Dean Jackson to report to us, okay, what are the latest numbers for applications, admits, yield? Once we're out of admission season, that'll fall back. We're in budget season, I might ask the Senior Associate Dean for Finance to give an detailed report. I will know before what I want that meeting to accomplish, even a routine meeting. For that meeting, we send out an agenda every Friday. The meeting is Monday morning. I always make sure that there is an agenda, even if it's very similar to what it was the week before. Let people know in advance what it is you're going to discuss, and surely, if you want somebody to be prepared to report out, make sure they know about it. Email, voice, whatever it is. Have an agenda. Have a follow-up. A meeting should never conclude with, well, that was a nice conversation. That's a conversation. That's not a meeting. There are different ways you can do that. My assistant, Maren Paslick, sits in on that meeting, and what I've asked her to do is I say, look, as that meeting unfolds, and we say, okay, so-and-so, you're going to talk to somebody else about thus and such, then you'll get back to me next week, right? She'll take a note of that and keep some sort of record of that. Sometimes you'll have a formal statement of conclusions. And if you're a high-level government meeting, if it's well-run, there will be a statement of conclusions that gets circulated immediately after the meeting by having a note-taker. Always a good idea to have note-takers in meetings. That's one's really important. If you are running a meeting, make sure everybody who has something to say is heard. One of the arts to learn, and you can begin learning it now just in the kind of student work groups and stuff that you have, is as you are running the meeting, first, you should not be doing most of the talking, unless you might at the beginning say, look, here's an important piece of information, here's a kind of basic policy I want everybody to understand, or something like that. But then you should be kind of listening and guiding and questioning. You should not be doing most of the talking. And if you put your mind to it, one of the things that you can do is you will notice he's sitting there with his arms crossed. He doesn't look like he's entirely in agreement with what Professor Marquez, who also has his arms crossed, has just said.
But we agree with each other.
Well, actually, would you like to say a little bit more about that, Professor Marquez? I mean, what you do is you read the body, and this, by the way, is what a good teacher does in a seminar. Professor Marquez clearly has something to say, but being a shy and bashful person, he's not going to say it unless I say, Jaime, do you have something you want to say about that? And that is an art form, but actually after a while you'll learn to read body language it's not at all hard. You'll very quickly pick up who has something they want to say. And it's very important to make sure that they get heard. Sum up. Meeting should have a clear beginning, should have end on time, and when it ends, say, okay, even if you just say, okay, we're going to meet the same time next week, or look, here are the big takeaways that I have from this meeting, or does everybody understand what they need to do for the next meeting? Or as I understand, what we've agreed to do is to raise tuition 25% next year. Are we still clear? Joking. Bad joke, I get it. But you know, that's, even if there was sort of an agreement, sometimes if it's a really important decision, you want to look around and say, okay, so we're all on the same page here. Now, this all, I am sure, seems simple-minded to all of you. I have seen meetings with assistant secretaries of state, with generals, with corporate executives that violate several of these rules, if not, in fact, all of them. It's really easy not to do those things. If you do those things, you get a reputation as some kind of organizational wizard. You really do. And you will accomplish a lot more, and people will enjoy working with you. Because actually most people prefer clarity and crispness and regularity and predictability, and above all, being heard, even if they don't win the day. So that's about organizing meetings. Any questions, thoughts? Yeah.
What is a tickler file?
A tickler file is where you ask somebody, usually on your staff, to check in a week later that something that we all agreed to actually happened. So during World War II, Winston Churchill, with whom I am obsessed, would periodically put these stickers on something particularly urgent that said, "Action this day." That would then go into a tickler file run by Hastings Ismay, who was a general who was basically the sort of the chief of staff of the whole system, whose job it was, one of his assistants did it, would be to go back to the ministry that had just gotten that instruction to say, okay, did you actually do that? So much of organizational life is not, it's not the big ideas, it's not even the decisions, it's the implementation. Did somebody actually do what they committed to do or what they were asked to do? And it's basically a way of following up on implementation. It doesn't have to be, the police state knocking on your door at 2 a.m. It's just, okay, you said you were going to do it. Did you do it? And again, this is all super, super basic, and it is violated so often, including on the National Security Council staff, you wouldn't believe. Anything else? All right, we're ripping right through this. So the next thing, and this is where it gets really geeky, is organizing your schedule. So bullet journaling. Anybody here know what bullet journaling is? Okay, one. So this is, you can look at this website, bulletjournal.com. This guy was, I think, some sort of presumably pretty neurotic, unemployed something, I don't know what, computer engineer or something. And he came up with a means for controlling your schedule, which I think is brilliant. If you go to bulletjournal.com, it's like a 15-minute video. It'll explain everything I'm about to tell you. And you can do it. And despite the fact that I'm really going to geek out with you about notebooks, you can do it with, a junior high school kid's composition book and a crayon. I mean, you need a notebook and a pen or pencil. Now, there's the advanced stuff, which it gets really interesting, but really it's very basic. So what are the big ideas behind bullet journaling? Let's step back, and you'll see I'm going to recommend another book, and the book that I'm about to put up, and I'm not a self-help kind of guy. It really is worth reading because I think this guy actually is useful at a very basic level. So what are the big ideas? Analog beats digital. That in terms of managing your schedule, you are better off having a large part of it on paper. I mean, just so you understand, my overall schedule is on my Outlook here, and different people have access to it and can put things, so in the long run, everything is there. Day to day, I use this, and I'm not using my iPhone, and I'm not using my computer to manage myself day to day. So for the long term, it's on the electrons. But in general, you're better off writing things down. I'm going to say a little bit more about that. And the basic argument is this is about mindfulness. This is the same reason why you are much better off doing what all of you are doing, which is taking note, those of you who are taking notes as opposed to daydreaming. Almost all of you are taking notes on paper. And I think I said this at an earlier meeting, that if you take notes on a computer, I didn't notice. If you take notes on a computer, you're going to end up as a stenographer. That is to say, the chances are you'll be just copying down a lot of stuff verbatim. Going analog, putting taking a pen, putting it to paper, forces you to think about what you're hearing because it slows you down. And there's physical action of a kind that's different from tapping at a keyboard. And in the case of bullet journaling, and this is the really big advantage, I think, is it causes you to think about how am I using my time? And have I blocked out the time that I need to do the different things that I'm doing? And have I figured out what are the tasks that I've got before me each day? And in fact, one of the things that is recommended by a number of people, and I think it's a good idea, is to like every day schedule a sort of a 15-minute planning meeting with yourself. Usually at the beginning of the day, sometimes the night before, and say, okay, what is tomorrow going to be? And so every night, what I'll do is I'll write down my schedule in this journal and work from it. And on weekends, I'll give myself a good half an hour for a planning meeting with just me talking to myself, which is something professors often do, just to kind of work through, okay, what is this week all about? What are the things I have to do every day to think about it? Another big idea is offload thoughts from your brain onto paper as soon as you possibly can. Again, there's nothing new about this. I remember when I was a cadet in ROTC, among the other basic mantras that they pounded into you was an officer is never without something to write with and something to write on. And that goes for anything. The only thing, and by the way, so I always have like a little notebook or some note cards. The only exception now is my wife and I do have an app called Wunderlist, which is just a great way of sharing grocery lists. So, we both know, I can put in, she can put in, Greek yogurt, so on the way home I'll get some Greek yogurt. The book to look at, and this guy actually is kind of involved in this bullet journaling stuff, is this fellow David Allen, Getting Things Done, The Art of Stress-Free Productivity. And of course he looks stress-free because he's making bajillions, telling you how to get yourselves organized. But actually, basic ideas there, I think, work. Okay, so how does this actually work in practice? You have a journal, and you organize it by month, week, and day. So, this is what February looks like. And here's just the number of the days. And then usually what I'll put down in this column is trips. Like, I'm going to Stanford tomorrow for a conference. Then I'm going back to California down here. And then there are one or two other things. And then what I'll do is, on the right-hand side, okay, during this month, here are some of the tasks that I need to accomplish. Some of them may be carried over from a previous month. Some of them may just be there. So that's my month list. And then because I'm really obsessive compulsive, I'll put a little arrow up here that tells me on what page is the previous month. Then at the beginning of every week, I'll do a weekly calendar. Same thing. I won't have everything that I need to do, but I'll have what are some of the big things that I need to do. So you can't really read this, but the big things I had today was illegible, meeting about the Henry Kissinger Center and how to organize a lot of stuff. Those are the big things. Tomorrow, the main big thing I got to deal with is flying off to San Francisco, and here are some of the tasks for this week carried over from the month. And then, here from another, this is what my daily schedule looks like. Again, I've got arrows going to what's the previous day and to what's the next day. And here's the schedule. This one is quite detailed. So 8 o'clock in the morning, I met with the dean. 9:30, I had a different kind of staff meeting. Then I went off and picked up my eyeglasses, and so on. And then on the right-hand side, I've got the tasks. And as you go through the day, okay, tasks that are completed, check off. Pick up your glasses. I don't have to write out pick up glasses. I say glasses, I know what glasses mean. Check that off. If it's really important, I'll use an asterisk. If I wasn't able to do it, I'll just move it forward with a caret like that. Or I might move it backward to the week or even to month. Now, on top of that, you have an index at the beginning so that you want all the pages in the notebook to be numbered. You have an index in the beginning, and I basically just do that day by day, so you can go through it. Appendices at the end. You might have a page on movies I want to see. You just jot them down. Get that thing out of your head so you're not, so you can, the whole idea of this is so that you can focus on the things you actually want to use brain power on. You don't want to use any brain power remembering the movie that you want to see or the next thing you want to download from Netflix. So just put it somewhere in an appendix. And then use symbols. So if you move something forward, a caret pointed that way, move it backward, a caret pointed that way, really important. Asterisk, check mark, draw a line through it saying, I'm not even going to bother writing Peter's letter of recommendation. I've given up on him. Hollow circle for an appointment, solid dot for a task. Again, this is whatever works for you. This is an extremely flexible system which you can adjust. Now, the thing is, any good idea can be turned into some form of neurosis. And one of the things that you'll sometimes see with bullet journaling is it's like that kid in high school who couldn't do any assignment without 12 different colors of pencil. And some people really try to turn these things into some kind of weird art form. It's not an art form, this is just a way of keeping yourself organized, that's all. Now, to geek out. As I said, you can do this with a basic composition book. But if you're good, if you're really good, what you want is the Leuchtturm 1917. Why do you want the Leuchtturm 1917? Which you can go get at Jenny Bix. Well, first, you probably can't afford it because you're all graduate students or you're impoverished. But, you know, at some point you'll have a decent wage. It is, it's made in Germany. The pages are all numbered at the bottom, so you don't have to go in and put in the page numbers. It's got index, except it calls it Inhalt, okay? It has not one, but 2 bookmarks. You can attractively emboss it, and the quality of the paper is really good. Now, even if you have really good paper, but you like to use a fountain pen, which I do, what do? Well, you get the Sailor 1911 pen, extra fine point. And that, I find, if you're using Pilot ink, I mean, it's a Sailor pen, but you can use Pilot ink, the ink doesn't go through the pages. But what if you prefer to use, as I sometimes do, a Pelikan M600 Souverain? Even with an extra fine point, you get a little bit of leakage, just a little bit, through the paper, because it's a very free-flowing pen. The answer is, you send it to nibsmith.com, and they will actually kind of tune it down, and you say, I know this is a German extra fine point. I want you to take it down to a Japanese extra fine point. And they will do that. Like I said, any good idea can be turned into a neurosis. But there's actually a half-serious point. The half-serious point is, and I think this is actually true of anything. It's true of cooking. It's true of carpentry. If you have really good tools, you'll probably do a somewhat better job. If you've got a favorite pen, that's a nice pen, you may do a better job at this kind of thing. So I give you that for what it's worth. Okay, I've been talking a lot about becoming very compulsive. Get yourself a hobby. Okay, something.
Would that relax in your to-do list?
Yeah, you can. Okay, So there you go. What else would you like to talk about? Yeah. Yep. You know, there's that great quote attributed to the Japanese swordsman Musashi, step by step, walk the 1,000-mile road. You just begin, and it's a little bit the point I'm making at the end. Forgive yourself. Just begin at the beginning. And don't, I actually am serious, don't let this become a neurosis. Don't let, you know, if you skip a week or two, that's fine. But begin wherever you begin, and this is a lifelong journey. I mean, you know, unlike me, you have more tomorrows than yesterdays. Professor Marquez too. You know, you'll get there, and don't beat yourself up. Don't be, again, all joking aside, don't be neurotic about it. Just go into it and there is a certain kind of sense of accomplishment that you get, that you feel after, okay, well, I did that drawer. The next drawer I'll do next week. That's fine. It really is.
How do you deal with I have a fear of deleting files that I'm going to need later on, and therefore I will delete the file. Or I have a Geniza attitude that everything is sacred, everything stays where it is.
Yeah, I think with computers, actually, you can be a lot more slovenly about purging files. I mean, unless you're dealing with unusual file types. But what I usually do is, because I have them date stamped, I may periodically, if I'm in there filing something anyway, I'll just delete the previous versions of the same file. But you know, basically, at this point, storage space is infinite, effectively, for all of us. So I don't think you really have to worry about that. With paper, it's different. And with paper, I think you're better off having a limited number of file cabinets and just, you know, working from there. Anybody else? Yeah.
So I think one obstacle a lot of folks have with kind of the bullet journaling and sort of kind of thinking about your week systematically like that is the perceived need for margin, or sort of like, you know, my schedule isn't my own, and so how can I even think about, say, what's going to happen on Thursday, Friday, if it's Sunday, because, you know, I'm just going to have all these different projects. So could you talk about that, how you build in margin, or sort of build in for the unpredictability and uncertainty?
Yeah. Well, again, the first thing I think is, you know, basically kind of give yourself permission. It's, you know, the old Alcoholics Anonymous prayer, you know, give me the strength to change the things I can, the courage to endure the things I must, and the wisdom to know the difference. You can, because it's really an infinitely flexible system, you can build that in. I mean, you build in the white space. I mean, the other thing, by the way, I'll just say, and again, if you're participating in organizational life, as one way or another we all are, the reason why you want to have a good collection of journals is because, like, you know, today I had half a dozen meetings. I had notes, some of them just one line, some of them more extensive about every one of those meetings. And at the end of the day, I might make some little notes in the indexing page about those. So if I have to go back, say, I met the new American co-director of the Nanjing Center. And he said a couple of interesting things that I took note of. So if I ever want to go back and look at that, and I'll try to remember, well, when did I know I talked to him sometime in the last month or two. I'll just go through the index, and I'll see HNC. You know, and I'll flip to that page, and I'll be able to retrieve it. And so, you know, getting in the habit of always walking around with something that you can take notes on, I think is really, really helpful, especially if you're in a moderately complex organization. May not be the way you want to take notes in class, which is a different problem, and I would just probably have a separate file for those. But for the rest of your life, I think this is actually quite helpful.
Can I just add one thing before we put the next question? We have recordings of all three of these how-to events, and they're in the academic advising community page in Blackboard. If any of you are part of that, if you don't know how to get to it, you can email SAIS Library and we'll tell you. But you can get if you missed the earlier sessions, you can hear the recordings of those. Actually, see it. It's a YouTube video, so it's unlisted. So you'll need to go through that to get to it. But we do have them in case you want to go back and listen to anything from the other sessions.
Yeah.
So that's all I want to add. Yeah, there's an academic advising community page, right? And I think if you're not a part of it already, you have to send academic advising an email, and they'll get you into it. But that's where they are. Mm-hmm. Or I can email them to you.
Yeah.
This may be more of a time management question, but I've heard the saying, work smarter, not harder.
Yep.
So I'm wondering, I feel like the advice you give us is about like setting the table, how to, use our time efficiently. But I'm
Yep.
wondering if you have any more, or any takeaways on how to actually do that.
Yeah, so, I mean, look, the first thing really is try to make as many things matters of routine that you don't have to invest mental energy in. I mean, reserve your mental energy for the things that really require mental energy. Taking one of Professor Marquez's tests. You should be able to just focus on that without, at the same time, fretting about, okay, where did I put that shopping list that I had? And even, if you're getting ready to write a paper for Professor Marquez, if you say, okay, I know what the process that I go through is, then you can focus on the substance of the question. So I think that's the first thing. The other thing, and this, I really do urge everybody to read the, actually maybe if you could put that out there, make a copy of the William James's Habit. If you can, I mentioned this in my talk on writing. If there's a particular time of the day that works for you for writing, really protect that time. I mean, I know people for whom that is quite literally 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. For me, it's 6:30 a.m. to about 10 a.m. Different strokes for different folks. But those kinds of things, to the extent you can prevent your time from, some of your time will inevitably be fragmented. And as you move into more complex organizations, you'll see your time get very fragmented. That makes it all the more important to protect blocks of time. So for example, in my current job, I have so far reasonably successfully blocked out 2 mornings a week for writing. And so far, I've been able to protect those. But I mean, it's always a challenge. Remember, the question is actually exactly the right question. It's the one thing that is utterly inelastic is time. There's no way you can get more time. And so it is worth an awful lot of your intellectual energy to focus on how do I use my time efficiently. Simply by posing that question to yourself, you're more than halfway there. Yeah. Yeah, I usually, most of the files I get end up being PDF, although I'll tell you what my problem is. People will send me electronic files, and I can't really read electronic files electronically. I need to print them out. So I'll print them out. So I'll file the electronic file immediately in the right place, and then I'll print out the paper and throw it away. So, what have trees ever done for me anyway? Yeah. But again, some people can work from electrons, so, just file, like I said, storage space is basically infinite at this point, electronically. Anything else? Okay, go forth and conquer.